on.
Awesome.
We'll see. There's probably going to be a little bit of a delay. Pulling it up on here. Here we go. Okay, let me get. All right. Well, it looks like we've got a lot of people joining us today. Hi, everybody. My name is Candace D'Agnolo, and I am the founder of Pet Boss Nation. I'm just waiting for this to load before we talk too much. It'll start right away in a replay. But can you guys hear me? Everyone's saying good morning. I want to make sure someone.
Candace, your Wi-Fi stinks.
My Wi-Fi stinks. Okay, let me see. I'm gonna leave it here. Here's what we'll do. You can hear me though,
Beautiful.
but my picture sucks. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Yeah, they can hear us. Okay, cool. Well, here's what we'll do, just so that I can find maybe some better Wi-Fi. I don't want to delay the process. I'm so excited that I've got some very special guests with us tonight. I want to start by introducing who we have on. Okay, we'll let you guys maybe introduce all three of yourselves while I'd move. That can help. All right, so we've got right in the middle with the cool t-shirt on, Don't Be Fooled, is Kohl Harrington, the director of Pet Fooled. So, Kohl, why don't you tell us why you have your two guests with you today, Billy and Tazz? Like, what part do they play in Pet Fooled?
Tazz and I we have a doing business as name, also known as the NSA. So we're just extracting as much footage from as many people as we possibly can for the next film. So we don't know what it will be the next film. We're just filming. So there is a retreat happening this evening and tomorrow that where
we're at with Answers Pet Food. They were honored to be a part of it, and they're allowing us to film. So it's very exciting.
I met Answers years ago.
I'm with you.
Okay. Years ago, so really I started filming with them as I was doing Talk to Us campaigns.
Mm-hmm.
But the original time I met Answers was way back in the day at the AHBMA conference. In the movie, you see us go to all the different booths. So one of the booths we went to was Answers Pet Food. I was actually talking to a veterinarian, and they're like, you need to speak to this company, you need to speak to this company. And I spoke to them, and
now
I think Jackie scared me at the time. I'm like, who is this? Well, what is she talking about? And then years later, it stayed into my brain. So it was like pretty cool.
Got it.
So,
all right, that's awesome. So,
I want Billy to.
Can you hear me better? Is my internet better?
You hear? Yeah, the picture's much better too. So
okay, good.
Please introduce yourself.
So
you're definitely.
I should mention we are actually live in the Answers at our plant in the break room. So we are at Answers plant currently.
We stopped all filming.
Yeah, absolutely. And I am the I just got a new title, so you'll have to excuse me if I'm like stumbling with it. I am the nutrition science director of Answers Pet Food. So I do
nutrition science director. Congratulations on your promotion.
Thank you very much. So I do all of the health and nutrition consultations. I'm involved in R&D, in formulation. I do, some of the social media stuff, most of the traveling for the company. We're a very small family-based company, so we all have our hand in a lot of different avenues.
Yeah. Can you, I think that most of the people that are watching right now are familiar with all three of you, but I think there's going to be, an even wider audience. There's probably people who are watching today who've never heard of Pet Fooled or who haven't heard of Answers. So can you just give us a quick rundown of what Answers Pet Food is?
So Answers Pet Food is the only producer of fermented raw pet food. So instead of doing a kill step, we do an inhibition step. And essentially we're filling up that food with good bacteria and allowing it to grow, the food remains raw and it's pre-digested by bacteria. So it's inherently the healthiest thing. That fermented foods are the healthiest food that any mammal could eat. So.
Okay. Yeah, I just started giving my pets Answers, and the changes for the better have been amazing in such a short amount of time.
Well, thank you for doing that. We really appreciate it.
And okay, so then Tazz, you got into town a few days ago and have been hanging out with the crew there?
Yeah, not hanging out is an interesting word. Yeah, have been hanging out, have been doing lots of stuff. I well, I work with Pet Boss Nation as your retail nutrition advisor. So it's been an interesting ride with you, and thank you for having us today. And really important, I think retailers really need to, if they haven't seen Pet Food, they should really make the effort and watch it. It's on Netflix. There's lots of places where they can see it. And the industry is changing. There's more raw everywhere, with the exception of the store we were at yesterday. We can't believe they didn't have any raw. I was like, what the hell? Nobody knew what a freezer was. They had refrigerators. So it was it's an interesting time with the pet food industry and retailers. And I think this is when we need to be the most educated. The more we know, the more we can give back to our customers. And I think Pet Food is a great starting point for, just to understand the basics. So
right, I totally agree.
There's going to be so much more that we're going to put out.
Okay, so let's take a back step in case people haven't seen Pet Food yet. So you can go get it on Netflix, like they've said. There's lots of places. I've put the link in the comments there of where to watch it. I will, so basically it's about an hour long, right? And Kohl, you've gone into kind of pull the veil back, or like really explain like what it is that's happened to the pet food industry over the last 100 years, and kind of how we've gotten from them eating, not, I guess in the wild, or not packaged food, right? Family scraps, or like at the tables at home, right? From that, which wasn't that long ago, to now having this packaged, processed stuff we know now today as dog food. And I definitely agree with you, Tazz. Like as a retailer or anyone who sells dog food, cat food, you have to watch this, because I think a lot of times when I'm a former retailer, and we would go to learn about how to speak confidently to customers about nutrition, sometimes it's like way over the beginning. It can take years to really understand how to confidently communicate. And I think your movie really breaks it down in such an easy to understand way that it's easy for consumers, and really easy to start giving a foundation to help retailers become more confident.
Thank you for that. I do feel like once you feel like you've solved it, then something new comes along, and it's like it just keeps evolving. And
yes.
I don't know. I would anticipate in the next 4 to 6 years, I could be crazy, but I feel like the industry is going to be massively different. I could be crazy, but I mean, sometimes I look and I'm like, will this questionable dry product that's just, haunting my dreams ever go away? I don't know, but I feel like the future holds a lot in regards to quality products being understood to the consumer, because everyone who watches part 1 will come and say, what brand? And it's sort of like, well, what do you want to see in a brand? And people don't understand that. So it's trying to get that information and that interest to the consumer. What would make a good brand for you, the consumer? And people don't even know for ourselves. Before I started doing the Talk to Us campaigns, which you can see on the Pet Food website and YouTube, I thought all just raw was the same. I didn't know the differences that could exist. And literally, I feel like for a few people that will not speak to us for good reason, some of these brands that are raw it's like you've reverted back to the dry food industry. So
really?
Raw was birthed out of such horrific quality of food. And I feel like over the last 5-6 years, companies transition, and a lot have reverted back to step 1, which is horrific quality ingredients.
Well, you got to talk about what you mean by horrific. They're using vitamin packs in raw food where it's unnecessary. And if it's done properly, I'm going to let Billy take this on, because this is where he's brilliant. Well,
and then too, it's just sort of like this spectrum of food. It is important for me to get to people that it's not all the same. And I feel like once people understood that, then they could understand, well, in the variety of what you want to feed, how many choices on the spectrum are you comfortable feeding? Because once you purchase and feed these products, you're supporting that way of agriculture, and life for us. I don't know if that makes sense. But
Mhm.
I'll let you.
Well, I mean, everything comes down to sourcing and processing. And sourcing is really the crux of every food issue, right? And so, a really good example of that is, for instance, there's two types, there's two sort of main fatty acids that deal with inflammation, one of which is omega-3 and the other is omega-6, right? So if you were to take a cow and you were to source a 100% grass-fed cow, that ratio would be a 2-to-1 ratio. And you don't have to remember this, but that would be a 2-to-1 ratio, which would be a healthy inflammatory ratio for your entire body. So you want your body to fit somewhere in that spectrum, your body or your pet's body or whatever. Now, if you were to simply use grain-fed beef, it would be a much higher omega-6 ratio, and you'd be dealing with a pro-inflammatory food, an inherently unhealthy food. So the difference between eating your animal eating grain-fed beef and grass, 100% grass-fed beef, is the difference between a healthy food and unhealthy food. And you have to take that back to every single ingredient in order to maintain healthy ratios of virtually every nutrient. And so with sourcing standards differing so much, and then processing standards, so then you take all of those nutrients and you apply different processing steps or non-processing steps, and that changes the nutrient profile. And unfortunately, I was just at AFCO, last week, and unfortunately, all of the laws are written to the point where consumers they have to trust the brand that they're using, and the retailers have to trust the brand they're using, because we can't differentiate that on a label. Here's a good example of that. We use 100% grass-fed and grass-finished beef. On our label, it just says beef, because we can't put a qualifier on there. And so it really takes campaigns like Kohl's, where he's going behind the scenes and showing you how it's produced, or like on our Talk to Us campaign, we showed our sourcing of our meats. And for the retailers, it's incredibly important that you have some trust and evidence in the producers. Otherwise, it's kind of a free-for-all in ingredients in every aspect of the pet food industry.
And a couple of points there. There's a episode that I'm in the middle of editing now with a company where the owner of the company is saying, "I wish there was an ingredient police," because it's really sort of like AFCO, purposely or not purposely, I don't know, but it's like a cookie cutter. So once you go into the store, my issue is I can't discern this from this. And that's the biggest issue, and having to comply to these AFCO standards to be in compliance with state law or regulations, you can't tell the difference in the qualities of the foods. And I mean, if that was set in place, I think that would be a major, massive change.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting. I've been with Billy in certain situations over the course of filming and stuff, and overhearing him being like, "Is this grass-fed beef?" I don't think that way for myself until I started doing all of these different campaigns. And it's not changing me overnight, because humanity, we think in terms of taste and price and fun, and we're not thinking in terms of, well, where did it start and what process did it go through? It's like out of sight, out of mind. That's what you say. And I find that fascinating, which is sort of like, well, why is it the world just pasture raised? Like, I can ask that stupid question, but I want to know the answer. Why isn't that just the way we do things?
Yeah, these companies are spending more on their beautiful packaging than the stuff in it, right?
I'm the annoying person at the restaurant who has to know everything about the meat before I'll actually eat it. So that's what he says.
So he has two of us.
Tazz is too.
But that's good. I think in Pet Fool, that's what, you really did dig into, like that if it says natural on the bag, like what it really means, like by the AFCO regulations of what can be, I think it is AFCO, right, that outlines what natural means, right? And it goes into that it actually, the rendered is still considered natural.
And they actually outline also what raw means as well.
Okay. So, yeah. And then, so I guess with the AFCO, I'm curious, Billy, you would probably know then, is it a little like incestuous where like the top people at AFCO are actually also on the companies of all of these big companies?
Yeah. So what happens is there's a few different committees. There's the Ingredient Definitions Committee. There's Pet Food Committee. And what you have is, so you have a whole room full of people who are at the meeting, and there's microphones. You can go up and say something. And then you have the committee that's actually deciding on what, and on one side of the committee is regulators, and on the other side is lobbyists. And those lobbyists, maybe from the renders lobby or something like that, or But what they do to what companies do to get on these committees, because I couldn't be like, I'm from Answers Pet Food, I want to be on a committee, because that's kind of like an ethical violation. What they do to circumvent that is they actually form like a group of, these three big companies might form an association, and then they can go on that committee from that association.
Got it. There's a loophole.
Companies that are making all the regulations, and when you're there, it's a pretty frustrating.
And it's definitely incestuous. And what's scary is that we don't have something like that for retailers where we can speak up, because we have so much power in changing the way pet food's manufactured. We can direct these people that are making the decisions, these lobbyists. And we don't have that group. Candace, you and I should talk. We need a group that can put this together and actually cares about the environment. If we love our animals so much, we love our cats, we love our dogs, our gerbils, the rabbits, why do we not love the animals that are feeding us and them? Why aren't we treating them as beautifully as we're treating our own animals? I'm disconnected from that kind of mindset, and this is why this movie was so important to me, because Kohl went back to species appropriate, and that is for all of us. That's for the ruminants. Cows are meant to eat grass, not shells from the cocoa plant. So,
M&M candy bar left.
Well, shells from the cocoa plant. So, and it's very frustrating to know that I have a voice, but I'm a squeak, I'm a pimple on the world's rear end, and there's only so much I can do by myself. So having a oh man, that comes along in a Celine Dion song.
I'm asleep.
Well, you have to start somewhere, but I mean, you have to start somewhere, and you guys are starting it, and there's a movement.
I can't hear.
Can we hear you?
Yeah.
I had a revelation of, if independent retailers, and the importance of what you're doing, if I may say, is if there was a consensus in retail that this is acceptable and this is not. So instead of being at the mercy of companies or consumers, and I understand that, but if retailers had a consensus that said, you know what, we're fed up with this and we want this to go away, and that was understood and communicated and people stood by that, that would become normal. And independent retailers, far more effective than a documentary filmmaker, could together change this industry and drive certain practices and certain companies out of business. The issue is proactiveness and community coming together and constantly working together, like the AFCO meetings. If all retailers were to go to the AFCO meetings, how the industry would be different. If all healthy pet food companies went to the AFCO meetings, you'd have, just retailers alone, you had 5,000 people against the, 5,000 against the 400, lobbyists who were powerful. So the power.
Well, can people just show up to an AFCO meeting, or how do they hear about these things?
So actually, interestingly, and I have no information about this, but at the last meeting, there was actually a little bit bigger of a group there, and we were actually talking about potentially organizing retailers and consumers that want. So it's in a different spot every year to actually go. Now, it's not cheap, right? It's $500 to go to the meeting. However, how cool would it be if we could get, let's say I think there was 450 people at this last meeting. How cool would it be if our group of 10 people who are normally there was 500 people, and there was representation and people were going up to the microphone. So I don't know sort of any details, but it would be really neat to be able to see that. And if people actually saw what was going on at these meetings, one example I'll give you is at this last meeting I was at, they approved an ingredient for use as a protein source, and it's a extract or byproduct of biodiesel fuel. And so now you can see that in pet food as protein. And so essentially it's just a recycling program for waste into pet food. And so every meeting you see these approved ingredients. Now imagine if we could have consumers there walking up to the microphone in a line saying, I don't accept this.
Yeah.
That would be a powerful thing.
It would be very powerful. That'd be very powerful.
Because people often look at, why don't you investigate this, or why don't you talk about that? And mine is to throw it back on the consumers and retailers and a lot of manufacturers that I've met sort of like, that's in your hands.
Mhm.
That I want to be a mirror for that question to sort of pop back and say, well, what if you were doing this as part of a collective group?
Mhm.
That's where the real change comes from.
So we do have, yeah, definitely agree. And I think that leads to one of there's three kind of like hot topics I want to talk about too. And then, and we do have a couple questions. Before I get to that, just because we're already talking about this issue, is that, I got one of the questions I got, and we have a lot of retailers in our community, and there are a lot of independent retailers that run the spectrum too, just like quality of dog food. There's a lot of retailers who range from what they carry. Some retailers, even if they're still small and independent, still have some of the lesser quality treats and brands because either they bought a business from somebody and they haven't moved that food out yet, or B, the customers are already, they're coming for it and want it, but they don't want to lose that business, and maybe they just haven't become confident in talking about how to transition yet. And then you've got people who, sell really high quality stuff, but maybe there are some of those other brands because they're trusting the brands and they think it's good, but it really isn't good yet. So I guess one of the questions that came in was that they love pet food, they want to show it, they want to spread the message, but they're feeling almost like they might be a hypocrite for talking about how bad this stuff is, but then still selling it. I personally, believe, and I would love, I teach our community this, that, I believe in integrity and coming from selling what you believe in and what makes what you stand behind the products that you sell in your store. And so my advice would be to eventually wean all that stuff out if you don't feel good about it. But I'd love your perspective on how you would answer that question for these retailers.
So I'm just going to jump in here because I carry some of the lower end brands. I'm very high end, and my focus is on species appropriate with almost everybody that walks in. That's how my staff is trained. I spend 3 months training everybody, each new person that come in. So what's really key, I carry some of the lower quality brands. One, it's because they have visibility in the huge market that we're dealing with, and I pick and choose what I carry, because I need to be able to transition people from even the worst diets over, and I have to do it slowly. And people are not quick to change. They're scared, and diarrhea is one of the biggest fears. So we have to get them over slowly, and that opens up pathways. And the main thing for retailers is to learn enough so you can open up those pathways while you're selling that lower quality food, to get them to the next step. Next time they come in and say, well, I know we're moving you from brand Z to brand X, and that brand X is a little better than Z, but you're just not there yet. Let me help get you to brand A. I want to work with you. Next time you come in, we're going to switch up to this brand, and we're going to switch up to this formulation. Whether, if you're going from dry, go to canned, and then from there you can direct them to watch YouTube videos of Billy's education seminars. And there's a lot of information out there. You can start directing it and set the pathway. And they're going to talk to other people. We can instigate the change. And it's not like we are killing anybody by having the crappy foods in our stores. Sometimes we need them to be able to get the people in so we can change the mindset. Mm-hmm. It's about balancing. Mm-hmm. But educate your employees. That's the key that I think is important, because when someone does this in a store, it scares the daylights out of me.
Yeah.
And I guess my view on that too is it was important for me in part two to speak with a few dry food manufacturers, and we have a few that did speak. Mm-hmm. Interestingly, none of the dry food manufacturers that step up and agree to go on film are saying we do the 100% most perfect thing ever. Every company, most companies are in it for the right reasons. And, you speak to raw food companies, and then Billy will be saying, we make this, which is, the best thing ever. I'm here to say there are multiple varieties of options out there in the dry food, dehydrated, canned, home cooked, or gently cooked, and raw food. there's a spectrum of good there, and then there's a spectrum of horrific in each one of those. So my main theme whenever I talk to people is trying to say, instead of picking one thing, feed a variety. It's not about one option. So if someone's feeling like, oh, I'm going to be a hypocrite, well, there are good spectrums of the dry foods. There's a good spectrum of, gently cooked. There's a good spectrum of raw and canned.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that is interesting to me is the fear of retail getting into this mode of trying to battle. You have the relationship with the dry food manufacturers and you carry them. And it's not that they're necessarily bad or anything, but they've created a convenient product that fulfills a need. I'm trying to push out, add in more fresh variety. It's not like you have to shut that away overnight or say, I'm going all raw. That's not the point. My point is not to say if you feed a dry food, you're the devil. That's not the point at all. Like I spoke with Maria from Carnivore. If I had an animal, I don't have one, unfortunately, at the moment. I'm going to, I know this person. I've spoken with them. I've seen them face to face. I know what their company's about. I know their sourcing. I wish all dry was like that.
Right. Yeah, that was actually a question that just came up. Is there any kibble that's good, or is raw the only option? I think you've kind of answered there on that.
Right. And it's sort of like, it's not even about the kibble. It's about what sourcing and approach to feeding is good and manufacturing and bringing it to market, and then what's bad. I mean, so that's very difficult to sort of explain because it's sort of like people want quick branding. But if you take the time to call, I mean, if this is retailer, so if you call Maria from Carnivore, and have that conversation with her. I was lucky enough to get to do it in person, and I'm hopefully going to do it a few more times because I'm going to link up with her at several events. But that's the conversation that I'm personally looking for, which is, she's not going to tell you that she's the best and only thing, and she's not trademarking terms like she's most appropriating, ingredients. She's created a product for convenience, but the highest quality product she could for that level of convenience. And she's honest about when you do it, you lose the thing I love that she said is when you do processing, you have to be realistic that with a certain amount of processing, you lose a certain amount of nutrition, and you never want the convenience to overtake the nutrition aspect. So and it's difficult because within AFCO, everything's just the same. What's the difference between Carnivore and Benefol? I mean,
there's a lot, but for the retailer argument on that, like I love Carnivore as well, and I tried to sell it in my store, and it's too expensive for our customers, right? So that's going to be the argument that a retailer is going to say is that the price point for some customers, they're not going to want to spend it. But I like what so I don't know if you have, but I like what you said about nutrition's more important than convenience.
So I find that fascinating, which is sort of like, what's the best dry food? Well, here is a very well sourced. They don't even have to add a vitamin pack to the food because it's coming from the nutrition, but it's too expensive. So I find that fascinating. So are we actually going for convenience, or are we going for nutrition? So those are things that I find I haven't really thought about until I'm talking about them now, which is sort of like, what is that line? And why can't we sway a little bit? Why does it have to be one thing? Why can't I do a little bit of this over here because I know that company, a little bit of this, but it's too expensive. I can't do it a lot.
Well, if we go back to I think what Dr. Becker said in Pet Food is really, it's more like, it does come down to some people can't afford to feed the higher stuff. And if you can just do a little bit, so if you were as a retailer who maybe gets that objection to a food like Carnivore or some of the higher, pricier stuff, they can sprinkle in some of the Carnivore get a smaller bag, sprinkle it into what they're feeding, and maybe start to see the change. And as a consumer, they build their confidence, start doing their own research, and the change will happen.
I have an issue with the fact that food costs a certain amount of money, and other things that are not food are being sold and marketed as food. So I think that's the issue there, which is fascinating about the Carnivore situation, which is sort of like, I mean, we were looking at some packages of food yesterday in a store, and it's like, how many pounds for $15? And it's like 30 pounds. I don't know. It was an insane amount of poundage going on there. But that's not food.
It's not food. Yeah, I like that too. That's really powerful, I think, as a retailer, if you were in
I
a
thought it
store.
was litter, to be honest with you. When I'm looking, I said, no, it's kitty litter. He said, no, it's food. Yeah, I'm like, come on. Price per pound for meat. What does that tell you?
And if I could, one thing I could offer, and I have kind of a skewed perspective on this because I would be the worst store owner on earth because I would just be like, everyone has to eat, fermented food and raw food. But so I'd be out of business very quickly. But I will say, in working with stores around the country, one of the things you can do to get people to do more, to buy higher priced foods or to get into raw food or something like that. And actually, there's a really good video of this. A store owner I work with named Chelsea Kent in Colorado, who actually comes to the AFCO meetings. She's done this. And what you want to look at is the actual price per feeding as opposed to the actual sticker price. Because a good example of that is, and she's done a lot of work with this with terms of, she calls it price per calorie. So she actually takes some of the large bags you might get from, like a grocery store, like Target or something like that, right? And when you look at how much more you feed of that per thing, you'll find that the actual price per feeding, which is the actual price of feeding the food, it's not the price per bag or the price per, pound, it's the actual price per feeding. And we deal a lot with this in terms of our food, right? Because of the fermentation, you feed less of it than raw or HPP foods. So even if we were more per pound, you'd still pay less for ours because you're feeding less. So one of the things stores can do is to start to analyze, okay, how much you take a 30-pound dog and say, how much do you feed of brand X and Y and Z? And then you can start to figure out that, oh, actually with this more expensive one, you feed less. So it's actually costing less over the course of a month. So maybe educating your consumers on price per feeding versus price per bag. And then you'll find that it's really a wash between some of them.
I've seen that too, where I've been in stores filming. I was in one in Portland, and the freezer's here and the dry food's there. And I'm just like looking at the prices, and I noticed that a lot of the fresh food brands that were great quality brands were less expensive to feed. Because I was like, oh, they're kind of equal. And the retailer was like, actually, it's less expensive to feed, fresh food than it is that, because you're feeding less of the food. And I'm like,
Convenience is the
issue. Yeah. And we're so familiarized, and dry food's normal. I could have never anticipated that I would have made a movie about pet food, first off, because I'm like, really? This has got to be a joke. And then I literally, if I could have anticipated going into something, I was like, oh, it's probably going to be like a grain-free food or something,
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that unprocessed kept becoming a theme, and I'm like, oh, well, duh, but, so.
Yeah. So how are you guys doing on time? I know you've got a bunch of other things going. Do you have time for maybe 10 more minutes?
Oh, yeah, we're good.
We're good.
Okay. Yeah, got to plug back in.
But I don't know. I find it's interesting to meet so many different types of retailers too, because there's a spectrum to that as well. Because I've been in the stores that are, the great thing about making a movie, it's like, as Tazz said, I've covered the basics, and I meet a lot of retailers that, I would call people on the phone before it ever went on Netflix or anything. Like, I'm trying to put together screenings because I made a movie, and I'm like, who in the world is going to talk about raw food? Like, literally, like, people are going to laugh me off the planet. And then I would call some retailers, like, they've been doing it for 15, 20 years. I'm just like, amazing. They went through the same exact things that are presented in the film, but they came out with a store and went down an educational retail path.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think, it's really, it's been interesting too for me. I sold my store almost 3 years ago now, and I've been in the pet industry since 2006. So, my first store, we didn't have a freezer, and then, it evolves and all these brands come out and you grow. And now I'm meeting retailers now doing the consulting thing where their whole store, is, well, there's a very few of them that have like a whole store with the raw freezers, but it's amazing to me the raw category and the clients that I work one-on-one with inventory planning and really digging into the inventory. I mean, we're just, raw is exploding, and I'm always like, get more freezers. It's like, and that's the one thing too that really, I don't think you can buy it on the internet right now, at least not conveniently. And so it is a way to keep driving people into the brick and mortar stores. So,
And another thing too that I find fascinating, again, I feel as though the retailers, if everyone were to have a consensus, let's say if there's 5,000 retailers in America, and there's sort of a general consensus that all 5,000 are like, you know what, I'm sick of this and I like this, it could change the industry upside down. I mean, I wish that could happen overnight. And really honestly change the world, because, you know, once the industry's changed, it will change agriculture, even through documenting certain companies. They've seen changing in their sourcing, Answers being one of them, to where they would go and say, well, we need this kind of sourcing. We can't do grass-fed, grain-finished. We need grass-fed, grass-finished, and pasture-raised and all this stuff. And the suppliers changed based on that to provide that sourcing to them. That changes agriculture for the better. It changes the world to a place where everyone would want to see more of that, and not, you know, a chicken that would never see sunlight, you know.
Right.
And, you know, then going into our bodies. So
okay, let's get to this the whole issue right now of the media and the articles about, you know, dog heart disease being linked to grain-free foods. There was NBC just did a quick little video, like a 2-minute video about it, and put it online yesterday. And some of our clients have already kind of expressed that their clients are asking them questions, because, you know, they are seen as experts, some of the, you know, the consumers. But also what is difficult in this piece that they did, it's so vague. They don't really name anything and anybody. They don't talk in length about anything, but they say that this boutique food.
NBC's,
Yeah.
I mean, and you can be honest. We're friends, so just I mean.
Yeah, NBC was being big.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, it's media.
Okay.
Games.
Well, yeah.
But, you know, but it's very vague, and it's like, this boutique food did this to my dog, and you're like, well, then the consumer is going to think, well, I buy my dog food at a boutique, and so it's so vague. And I, you know, when it came up as a question in our group last night with Pet Boss Nation, I was like, you know, watch Pet Food, share Pet Food with. We have an email template ready to go that has the links to some sources. Get the customer on the phone, like get your phone out and just send it to them right there. You know, don't help, I guess, educate the consumer. Don't just let them leave your store with more questions. So what's your suggestion with how do you recommend that the retailer kind of approach this? And then one of the questions that's in the feed as well is, will Petfold 2, like, now that since you're still filming it, kind of address this topic?
Well, I feel like I'm about to jump all over the board.
Okay.
Here. Sorry. The main issue for myself, so the one thing that I have to know is that I'm never going to agree with you 100%. You're not going to agree with me 100%. Tazz and I differ, and I love her for the differences. Same thing, Billy. And, you know, I love getting phone calls from you to where you're like, think about this, and I'll be like, "Rrr!" So, I mean, that is a healthy, constructive criticism. I love that in life.
It's conversation.
Conversation. That's the whole point. And I don't know where to start with this. So I don't know with the film, you never know what's going to go in or out, because for a film, it's taking all of these conversations and translating it literally into a different language, which is media, like a digital media. So it's my job with a documentary to inform and try to entertain and educate. So it's like you're jumping all over the board. Now, in regards to this specific issue. So my question for part 1 of Petfold was, if it's not corn and wheat that dogs and cats should eat, what should they eat? Like, what should they eat? So that took years to sort of go down. You had to go down all the avenues, because the marketing said this is great. And so I'd go down the corn is great avenue. And, oh, you cited that study. So I'd have to read and study that study. So I was always constantly challenged. And I realized there was days where I would be exhausted after 3 hours, because I'm using 10 times more energy with critical thinking. Now, the industry moved away from grains, ironically. We won't call any out, but they might rhyme with Schmirino, where all of a sudden they defended grains for decades. All of their research was built on grains, then they just had a grain-free food, and they never explained it. They're just offering one of everything. Now they started coming out with freeze-dried raw. Okay. Now, so you've moved from corn and wheat to grain-free, which isn't any better in most cases. I'm going to be very diligent here because it gets intricate. because we have to realize that there's a difference between corn and bone meal and all of these things sprayed with God knows what and its middlings coming into pet food manufacturing plants on railroad carts. So railroad carts and either whole grains or whole,
Dehydrated meats that are not beef.
I'm trying to say whole grains,
free.
but what's a whole nut grain? I don't know what it is, but
Whole nut.
it's different than whole food. So I mean, it's literally recycling an actual whole food. Starch isn't a requirement for the animals, and that's not a confusing thing. I found that evidence in a veterinary textbook sponsored by Hills. However, yeah, it creates a convenient product. So the companies will say, you have an energy requirement as per AFCO, we're meeting that energy requirement. But energy should come from healthy fats. It should be protein fat, consisting of the majority of the diet, along with other things like organ and bone and yada, yada, yada. Now, in regards to the grain-free thing, my two sides of this is it's not needed to begin with. However, in regards to my dealings with the FDA, and I find it very interesting that the FDA is sort of putting this info out, I feel as though it's very irresponsible. It's irresponsible of the FDA. There's zero long-term extensive evidence proving this. I would rather them come out and say, you know what, we've done all of these studies and this is the proof, versus like looking into it. They did that with the chicken jerky. There's a problem here, looking into it. And so I don't know of animals dying left and right from this, but I could be wrong. I'm not going to say that it's not happening. I just find that when I interviewed with the FDA, and I feel like I see it now, and it's more of like someone's like laughing behind the scenes. I could be wrong, to where it's like they love controlling people through the media. If you read warning letters and if you talk to companies, the FDA uses media to get what they want because they don't have regulatory power in a lot of instances. And so that's the issue that I have, the irresponsibility of not having real research proving 100% this is happening in these instances. It's just everything's allowed. So that's one issue. And the other is just irresponsibility and lack of investigative reporting that really irks me, because I've seen newspapers recycle things just because the FDA says it.
Yeah.
If I could offer one interjection too, in terms of the nutrition aspect of it, it really boils down to one specific issue. And the interesting thing about it is, and I don't mean to be like alarmist in this case, but it really just boils down to plants. And so what you have is, when you manufacture food that is dry, you have to use a lot of plants in that food in order to hold it together. And when a dog or a cat or a human eat a lot of the wrong type of plants, all of those plants contain anti-nutrients. And those anti-nutrients stop your body from absorbing nutrients. They stop your body from potentially creating nutrients, right? And they actually take nutrients from your body. So those foods will actually take nutrients out of your body. And so what we're seeing now is that because a lot of foods are made with the wrong type of plants, be it grains or be it potatoes or seeds or whatever you're doing, I should say, unsprouted or unfermented seeds, you're going to run into this issue. Now, taurine, this is just my opinion, but taurine is just going to be the first indicator, because those anti-nutrients don't just stop you from producing taurine or stop you from absorbing taurine. They stop you from absorbing a whole host of other nutrients as well. And this is the same thing with people. If people are eating a diet high in these things, exactly the same thing will happen to people. And so by my estimation, there's two ways to solve it. The first one is feed a diet that is high in animals and animal products, so meat and eggs and raw milk and those sorts of things, and low in low carbohydrate vegetables. If you do that, zero chance of a taurine deficiency or deficiency of any other nutrient based on that. Or if you're feeding a processed food like that, you're going to, the way that they're formulated now, you have to add something else to it. You have to add, I don't know, sardines or raw milk, or you have to add an animal product that's going to make up for that. For those plants are going to take a certain amount of taurine or not let you produce a amount of taurine. So now you're going to have to add something to the kibble in order to do that. Unfortunately, I don't think the answer is to formulate dry food differently, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So do you think a good, I guess, response for our retailers in this response when they hear from customers is just to encourage the retailers to not panic themselves, right? Because there's not enough out there, and then to or information and proof of this, and then to your point, start to suggest and educate and bring in some of these those animal proteins and fats, like you said.
I wish the retailers weren't at mercy for alarmist things to pop out. I mean, people will accuse me of being alarmist or, fringe, or you just don't understand. You didn't talk about the full picture and stuff. But once they meet me and know me, then they understand, it's a massive topic. But I wish retailers wouldn't have to be at the mercy of
reactive media.
That I've shied away from Facebook because of that. It makes me sad and depressed because you're not able to have context and understanding and a really good exchange with people. It's not live. Getting to meet you in person and then, I don't know.
I mean, for me as a retailer and working on the nutrition side as well, it's the clickbait mentality of social media and our media really distracts us from what our goals should be. And one thing about all these foods that the FDA and the veterinarians and the media is putting out there, they were all complete and balanced based on AFCO standards. So now I'm going back to where I started. We do need a consortium. We need a group to come together and challenge these manufacturers and the industry as a whole. So yeah, they're complete and balanced. Everyone thought, when I have customers come into my store, they say, is this food complete and balanced? And I have to take a deep breath and say, well, what does that mean to you? And when our customers can't answer that questions for themselves, these are just words that have been put in their mouths, and they're just spewing garbage, is how I see it. I'm a little bit more aggressive than others, but take a step back, add some whole foods to that diet. If you can't afford a higher quality type of feeding, then add the raw factor by adding the raw goat's milk. Add some fermented vegetables. Bring variety into your animals' lives, and don't get married. Do not get married to brands. Give variety. That is one of the biggest keys. And the pet store, where we are as retailers, we are offering them variety. So show them where they can go from one brand to another, and not stick to the same type of food. They shouldn't be on only kibble. Add the canned in there. Go to the freezer and add the cooked products. Add the dehydrated. Give variety, because that will eliminate the risks of lacking in one type of essential amino acid or essential fatty acid versus another. That variety gives you a better overall spectrum if you are looking to do it in a processed way.
And what was the retailer and consumer looking for when they went from a grain food to a grain-free food? Like what needed to leave the grain food that is not in the grain-free food? That's what I find fascinating in this whole thing, because it could have come about. Grain-free could be from marketing, or it could be from reality of you don't need grain. So there's two things going on there.
The worst, a lot of the vegetable proteins, where it artificially ups the protein content of the food. Those grain foods, the corn, the soy, those are artificially increasing the protein content. So, and it's still happening, but we're using peas and legumes, and these are not available for our animals to absorb. So we're in the same place.
It's pea extract on a lot of them instead of like an actual pea. It's just fascinating. But
I think it's important to give your customers a realistic expectation, which is the statement complete and balanced is that company's best educated guess at what an animal could eat for its entire life. So no company, including ours, right, has 100% understanding of physics and biology and nutrition science. And so to say that if you've ever asked a company or something like that, does this have everything in it my dog needs? If they've said yes, they're either lying or they don't know they're wrong, because nobody knows exactly what your dog needs. And so that's why what she's talking about is so important. And even adding stuff from home. You know, if you can get your customers to buy the food they can afford but add a raw egg from home, great. That's a great upgrade to the diet. So,
throw in some blueberries.
And I just think in regards to all research has been taken, and it's a controlling factor and it's a panic factor. I wish and urge, because I mean, I failed with social media quite a few times. You know, get away from the Facebook. But at the same time, it's pertinent for everyone, especially if you're putting out information and if you're receiving information. My advice for people putting it out is it's very irresponsible unless you've done a lot of detailed research and can really back it up tenfold. Think twice about putting it out, and then maybe think twice about believing it, but that's not the world we live in. We live in Reactiveville, and I hope our world moves away from that. Take me back to the pasture and take me away from clickbait. My God, I'm not a fish.
I think we're just about out of time. Do you have anything else you want to?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple other comments about the thread. I go back, maybe Tazz or Billy. We can go back and maybe answer those questions later, because they're more about the actual like food and raw concept. But I guess my last question is more of like, when is Pet Food 2 going to be released here? Is there some time frame?
It's like the more you shoot, the more you need to shoot.
Yeah,
like,
you're already getting content for 3 and 4 and 5.
I'll give you. There's not going to be no more than 2. Now I have a secret project. I have a few secret projects that are sort of unrelated to the movie, but kind of related. But I'll save that for later. But the inside scoop is, so your bosses, Roxanne and Jackie. So I filmed with the Talk to Us campaigns. If you haven't seen that, the goal there is just how do you make your food? And so I find it very telling. I'm adding a bunch more over the next month or 2 to our website. I'm just behind on editing. Takes time. And so I filmed with Roxanne and Jackie, and so I've been able to have an experience of that. And so, I just keep popping up like with companies like, could I come to Oregon, or could I pop in here? And so I popped into Jackie's house yesterday, and it was great because they're just going around doing their thing. And we finally got into the mode where I can just sort of pop around with the camera and they're just living their life, which is great as a filmmaker. But then, as I asked a question, she looked at me, she's like, I thought I was done filming. And you do have these, like, you have some cuckoos out there that are like, come film me. Yeah. What can I do to get you to film me? But I'm filming the ones that are like, do we really have to film more? And I'm just like, we do. It's fun. It's fun.
Can I just say something?
We're having fun.
We're having fun.
And learning a lot.
One thing about the Talk to Us campaign, it's really important. These companies that want to be transparent are approaching us.
It's not us going to them.
Yeah, it's not us going to them, which is really great because they want the retailer and the consumer to see what they're all about because they care. They are making an impact, and I'm so grateful to be a part of this because I'm just learning. It's a college education and a condensed time. But one thing that I want to tell retailers and all the Pet Food followers, Kohl gets a lot of requests for, have you looked into this company? Have you looked into that company?
I'm not a database.
Thank you, Kohl. One thing I do want to tell you guys, if you want to help the process, go to the company and say, are you transparent? Challenge them. Don't ask us to go after them because we're doing all the research. This man has made thousands of emails and calls to the FDA, CDC, the USDA, and we're going to manufacturing facilities. It's work. And do your part. You want to know about a brand? Call them and say, hey, why don't you do the Talk to Us campaign?
And that's the basics.
Get them to us.
I mean, Talk to Us campaigns too is the basics. It can get very intricate, but just learning the basics has helped me and it's opened the world for me. In regards to what I will do or feed when I have an animal.
Yeah. So the Talk to Us campaign, is there a hashtag you're using or is there a website? Is it all on petfool.com or
petfool.com? There's like a tab that says Talk to Us and you can click.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I think I saw that there. It's at the top, Talk to Us. We're Whereas I feel like that would be like a talk to us, click on it, and I can contact you.
Well,
That's true.
I mean, if I could rename it, it would be How's It Made, but
No. It's great. It's fine. Totally fine. I want to make sure that people go there to look at that. So that's amazing. And I just want to, thank you all so much for coming on here and the work that you're doing. And I'm not opposed to let's work together and find out a way that we can either get more retailers to those AFCO meetings or get their voices heard, or Tazz, if you really want to pursue something, getting some guidelines of the retailers. I mean, we can definitely work towards that too. I'm all for what you're doing, the health and the wellness of our animals. And I just, wish you the best of luck on the rest of your filming. And I know you've got a lot of retailers who are on their way or already showing up at Answers Pet Food Farm. They're excited. I've heard some of them are going to be streaming live from their Facebook pages. And I think with the power of social media now, this is how you get the word out. And this is how you make change happen. As much as we hate that clickbait, it really is our platforms to spread messages. So,
I mean, that's it's a good and bad to everything, right?
Yeah.
Well,
right.
we're very excited to have everyone out, and we're very excited because we're very proud to say we take a lot of pride in what we do. So we're very excited for everyone to see it in person, because it's different to see it in person than it is, to see it anywhere else. So.
Yeah. I would love to encourage our viewers who are watching this, if you could tag a fellow pet industry professional in the comments so that they can come back and watch this. I think that would add a lot of value for them. Maybe they've never heard of Petfold or Pet Boss Nation or Answers Pet Food and what we're doing here. So tag them. I know you know a dog walker, pets that are a dog trainer, groomer, another pet store in your neighborhood. So tag them, please. All right, everybody. I'll let you guys go.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
We'll speak soon.
Okay.